Let's get Caston so we can keep talking about this. So your family goes year-round, or
every other year.
Okay.
It's obviously when you get married and whatever else, you usually switch off Christmas years with whatever extended family it is. And so every other year when it's my parents' turn, they choose to do a vacation instead of buying gifts. And they buy gifts on the off year anyway. But
Sure.
so there's 18 of us total with the grandkids included. And so we head off to some part of the world, and I usually get to plan the trip, and they flip the bill, and we have a good time. So yeah, we were just talking about, we do a humanitarian project every time when we're down there. At least I make them do that. So,
So you got a bunch of kids painting homes or adopting children, or
some cool stuff.
Not literal adopting, but adopting a child to give them gifts or school supplies, needs like that.
Yep, we've done orphanages, we've done couple of schools, either building or...
Where do you find these things?
Research, really, honestly. There's NPOs. This one's actually an organization called Amigos de Costa Rica that's out of Pennsylvania, was where they're LLC'd at, and then they've just got offices down there that they organize these activities for people that want to do humanitarian stuff, and you just kind of pick. They've got a bunch of them, and you pick a school or you pick whatever activity. We kind of customized ours because a lot of times they just want you to come and show up with supplies and money, which is great. We're happy to do that, but I want my kids to be involved in doing some actual physical labor or something, like or interacting with the kids.
Eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah, like when we did Honduras a couple of years ago, we had the kids teach a class. So they taught the kindergarten class and did a lesson, and then went and played soccer with them, and then...
That's awesome.
And they've even, my son still got pen pals and whatever else from that.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it's good. It's fun.
Every time I come in here, I feel a little worse about myself. Every time.
No,
because you're off, with your 19-year-old traveling the world and showing them all, historical sites that are amazing. And
travel's my thing, though. That's where if I have discretionary income, it's travel. And then the kids are blessed to be able to do these trips. And I feel like if they don't have some kind of element of service, they lose that Christmas giving spirit. So.
I love what you're doing. I want to implement it and know that I'm not going to. That's what I'm feeling crappy about myself.
But the cool thing is if you figure it out a way to do it, you'd only need to do one day or whatever else on your 6 or 7 day trip. And it's amazing how many times my kids will use, whether they're having to give a speech, a talk, something in church, the feelings and
or
whatever.
Even in school.
Exactly. In the experiences they've had with these service projects. So
I think that's
sometimes
fantastic.
they remember them more than the actual fun waterfall rappelling or whatever else activities we do. So
now you're waterfall and rappelling. Jeez,
we're doing some fun stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. See all you people out there that watch us religiously, why I would feel this big all the time when I'm around this dude.
Credit to my parents. They support this.
They did a good job.
Yeah.
Raising a fine young man.
I appreciate it.
And the beat goes on.
No, and everybody's excited to do it. Nobody complains. So.
Well, to me, that dovetails, and not even remotely, but I'm going to pretend like it dovetails into what we talked about last week, which I want to redo because I talk too much or you talk too much. I don't know which. Okay, I talk too much. But let's carry on. We were talking about, and I enjoyed something that we were off camera on. We were off hot mic, which that would always get really nobody into trouble. Actually, thinking about it, we're pretty
mild.
We're pretty mild by nature, but it's interesting that we got off mic. Ooh, I don't remember how long ago this was, but you'll remember it.
Okay.
One of us said something, and we both. And I think you looked at your cell phone and you go, well, I'm probably going to get an email or something or a text in that theme, like as though the phone was listening.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
You remember that? And I kind of think, well, I think look, I'm not going to get into that, whether that's true or not. I kind of believe that there might be an element of that going on for sure. But that rabbit hole's deep. But what we search online or in social media or in whatever we search online, it tends to end up in my social media.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've never been on this Pinterest. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's about. I don't understand what Pinterest is, so everybody can understand that I am not in that category whatsoever. I don't know what it is. But my wife used my phone 7 years ago and looked up, I don't even know what it was, but I have Pinterest emails, texts, and it pops up in my feed, in my social media feed. And Pinterest still doesn't know whether or not I'm a dude or a chick. That's the fun part about Pinterest, and that does happen with some because my name's Dana. That go either way, you know. So I get a little bit of a mixed bag as far as whatever they think I might be liking. And it's obviously age, you know, somewhere in the age. Somebody at 20 years old wouldn't be probably getting this Pinterest particular ad or whatever. Okay. So whatever we search for, kind of like when you go on to, let's say you're looking for a part you're building a house right now. And so you're looking for rugs. Might be something you're looking for at some point or whatever else. So there's going to be a billion things that you guys will be looking for. Remarkably, 4,000 emails and texts and things in your social media feed will start popping up about rugs. And that's just the way it goes. Okay? So let's say that you are a Kamala Harris fan, or you follow, let's say, Gallegos, which I don't know who follows any of those types of politicians. Or let's say that you follow a pop star that's very known to be left-leaning. Let's say you're a Taylor Swift. You get a whole bunch of things about her nowadays, being, you know, kind of the new Barbara Streisand type. Or let's say that you're a Trump fan. The only thing that you're getting, that your eyeballs are seeing, is things that will get your attention. And so all of a sudden, you know, I want to see a little bit about the Trump assassination, and there's been, you know, attempts, and there's been a couple now. And now all of a sudden I'm getting everything under the sun, Fox or Sky or Forbes or whatever else is boom, 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 boom. And one could very easily fall in love with MAGA, the message there. And I do like the message, Make America Great. Why not? That's a great message. I think it's a good tagline. But okay, that's fine. But regardless of that, that's what I'm seeing all the time. And I'm also seeing the red, the white, the blue, the red, the white, the blue, and it's all kind of Trump related. And so people that are famous, that are followers and supporters and things like that tend to pop up on these feeds as well. It could be on my YouTube, it could be on the Facebook, it could be on Instagram. And it's all I see. So I don't get a whole lot of Harris exposure, right? And the same thing goes the other way around. If I were to really get involved with searching out Miss Harris, I would probably get a ton, well, not probably, I would get a ton of that information, and I would be, you know, basically begin to develop, I wouldn't want to call it hysterical, but it does appear that can happen. But I can develop a stronger opinion that I otherwise might have had.
Sure. And
I was going to bring my phone. You have yours nearby. It's a house divided, will fall. I don't remember who said that. I know that Lincoln re-quoted it well.
Yeah, let's look it up.
Just throw in house divided. Who said that one?
Just thinking it's a Bible verse.
Well, that could be.
It is Matthew 12:22.
Well, okay, then you can't get any better than the head coach.
It was used in a speech by Abraham Lincoln on the state capitol in Springfield in 1858.
Yeah,
So,
a house divided cannot.
Matthew 12:22, Mark 3:25, and Luke 11:13.
Okay,
The
so
words of
Jesus,
Yeah.
Jesus said it,
Yeah, that's
and
even
then
better.
Lincoln re-said it. And here we have, there's a Cody Jinks song called Folks. Now, Cody Jinks, I'm a big fan because he has a very, very good, his art is fantastic. He's a throwback country guy, kind of like they call them outlaw country guys or whatever. They got the beards, they look like ZZ Top guys. His lyrics are second to none. I mean, there's a lot of good music out there right now, which I always find interesting when we have culture shifts. Music starts to get a little bit dynamic. During the 60s when there was a lot of heat in this country, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of heat, like what we're talking about right now. But back then, it wasn't on steroids because of the social media that we have. There was the New York Times, the New York Post. There was, the newspapers of the time, and some were considered conservative. Let's just call it propaganda, I guess, but conservative-leaning newspapers, and there were those that were liberal-leaning newspapers. Well, those liberals would be considered Republican right about now. But now what is a Republican and what is a Democrat? Really, we're starting to get to that faded line now. The parties are very less defined than ever before. And I believe that it's exactly because of the reason I'm talking about, that we're that divided. Like you're either here or here. There isn't a whole lot of places in between.
The foundations.
And so we started talking about that last week. And I wanted to lay it down and then get your take on that, because I feel like because of that, and I feel like that did not happen with Trump. I don't think the Great Divide happened with Trump, but I do think that he gets erroneously blamed for it. Trump came in as an outsider, not really a politician, came in with policies and wanted to kind of work those policies, did a remarkable job at foreign relations, in my opinion, ticked some folks off, and his outlook on you guys need to be paying your share, you guys need to be kicking some things in here. Mexico, I need some of your folks on our border guarding it. We're not going to do this alone. This is your border. This is our border. This land is my land. This land is your land. So he got a lot of, I think, hysterics, but I think that any president, so we've talked about this before in another pod, I think that any president that has far too much power nowadays than the Constitution anticipated a president having, and that did not happen with Trump. He did not add one drop of power to the presidency. It had been added with the 3 or 4 prior to, maybe going back in time even further than that. But the presidency has been, I hate to use a word, usurp, has been gobbling up more and more power than it should have for a long time. And Obama, in my opinion, it got very strong, but it began with Bush as far as the executive power. And so, but FDR, took a big bite of that apple. So we can go back in history and have a history lesson, but that's not what I want to do. I want to say we're inundated with, and you don't fall in this category, but you're a unicorn. We're inundated with, I am on this side or I am on this side. And so I'm going to vote across party lines here, or I'm going to vote across party lines here, to where I'm starting to see a fatigue is what I'm starting to see, a difference in the rhetoric and what I am watching and some of the independent stuff that I'm seeing. And I'm starting to see people kind of join the way you're naturally wired, kind of getting spit out in the middle. What is it? Bill Maher, is that his name?
There's a Bill Maher, I don't know who you're referring to.
He's a funny guy on the HBO there
yeah.
that I don't have a lot of experience with, but he's a conventional liberal that absolutely hammers the liberals, probably much more so than the right, because of he's not a big fan of woke.
Did you lose the camera?
I don't know. We might have lost the camera. Let's go find out.
Maybe this one.
It might have been. Good ears. You can keep the conversation going. So about Mar.
Yeah, HPO's not a channel in my lineup, so I know who he is. I was on one of his produced podcasts a while ago, but I haven't.
You were?
Yeah, that was the Mark Lamb one. That's a Bill Maher production.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so he's pretty,
Yeah, the
versatile.
fact that he's bringing a Sheriff Lamb in to do a podcast probably gives an indication of he's not.
But he's going to vote for a Gavin Newsom, and I find that to be unforgivable. I really do. I think, man, of all the people out there to vote for, and yeah, he's a pretty older man. He's sophisticated. He looks great. He's a pretty man. He's an idiot. He has run one of the most beautiful states into the ground faster than I thought possible.
Yeah, California
and
stuff.
Man, just because they're nice people in California, boy, they sure want to see their state ground into the Neverland. And look, the old saying is, if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. If I didn't go and see, I studied there for 3 years. I lived in California. My first kid was born there. Loved it. Contemplated staying forever. Loved it. Figured I could. There's no way I could make a living, get out of debt from law school, and survive there for a good 30, 40 years. I'd be just hanging on by a thread. And that was back then. Now it's like not even close to possible. And but you could live in a tent on the street, which that possibility wasn't open to me then. But now it's open to me. I can go and just join one of the encampments that seem to be enshrouding that entire state. I couldn't believe walking down San Diego what I saw. And that's right in the hub of where I studied. Yes, we had our homeless folks in Balboa Park, a few, and you'd even get to know their names. I had a couple of them. And we've always had homeless people around here as well because of the mild temperatures that we have. But dadgum, when I'm just seeing encampment on the streets in front of restaurants that are nice restaurants that and in front of, this beautiful city. San Diego's a beautiful city, but then it's just littered everywhere you look. You go to the zoo there with your kids, which is what we were doing. So we do some things with the kids. We go to the zoo there, and it's like, I cannot believe all around the zoo.
Yeah. And
all around, where does Shamu live?
SeaWorld.
There we go, SeaWorld. And so all around SeaWorld, you've got these encampments. It's crazy to me. And I say encampments, they're really just tents in any like spot they found. So the homeless issue. How in the world do you let a state that has that kind of horsepower, how do you use that horsepower to go straight down and just keep going down, down, down when you didn't think you can go any further down? So when Bill Maher says I would vote for him, it's like, okay, I don't get it. That doesn't match what you're saying. You're incredibly judgmental with things woke and pronouns and things like that. That, Maher feels like, let me be liberal, dadgummit. I don't want to be progressive. I don't want to be way over here considered an absolute crazy person. That's kind of his message.
I don't, like I said, I haven't listened to a lot of his stuff.
That's his message. And so I don't want to be crazy, but I'm voting for, Gavin Newsom, and I'm going to vote for Harris, and I'm going to vote for the left side of things instead of contemplating and just hanging on and saying, you know what, I'm going to take a look at who the best person might be. Now, Bill Maher might not be in a position to say something like that because the only other option in most people's mind will flip immediately to Trump.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that he's talented enough, possibly, to where he can make that make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So here we have this social media and this very fast-paced informational shorts and headlines and all these things that are and they're for your choosing. They're today for your choosing. And so, that said, I feel like what that's doing is it's kind of creating an unintended consequence of where things are starting to shoot a little bit more in the middle. People are starting to kind of find themselves looking at it more globally. And I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the independent voter is more important now than it probably ever has been in the last 100 years. And we know that because, I mean, they're specifically, as this election approaches, because we know how 2020 went down, there's polls that are specifically targeting, I mean, really, that's what everybody's looking at right now, because party lines are what they are, and they're pretty well established, and those numbers are pretty close. And so now it's this independent voter block that is much bigger than it was ever in the past.
Yeah.
And I heard this morning, New York Times here in Arizona was polling independent Latino voters, and the surprise was that it was starting to move in Trump's favor instead of Harris's favor, which was a big surprise to the New York Times. And so I know that they're specifically looking at the independent voter, and the only reason that they're looking at him is because it's important, because that's what's going to sway the election one way or another. And so I appreciate that that's being noticed. I think that bigger voting block is, like you said, because it's hard to. Sorry, my phone's ringing here.
Answer. We would all love to hear what.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know who it is. That voting block is bigger because of this scripture that you quoted at the beginning, right? It's that a divided house cannot stand, and so there's a lot of people that are trying to buoy up the foundation in the middle right now because the division is so strong. And I hear all the time, these are my only two choices. Like, really, this is what I have to deal with. I hear that all the time. There are a lot of people that wish they were in a different circumstance or had different options than what we've been presented with. There are obviously people that are in love with both sides, and they're not going to change. The independent voter is going to be what decides this election, whether they're being represented, whether they will be represented. I think that's the choice that they're making, is when they're kind of down the middle, listening to both sides, where they're going to be best represented.
Right. I think that it's interesting because, again, Trump's been a interesting figure to study, and I've been taking a step back lately. Certainly a powerful personality, and in many ways gets in his own way and is unlikable, and in so many ways I don't know about unlikable, because the reality is he's incredibly likable in a lot of forums.
Yeah, he unnecessarily makes himself a target.
Right. He just whatever. He calls people fat. He calls whatever.
Yeah.
He calls names. It doesn't seem dignified.
Yeah.
All right, fine. But it's interesting to me to see that I don't think it would matter if you had Romney running right now, which I don't know how more milquetoast you could get than Mitt Romney. I mean, and I'm actually not much of a fan, and you may be, but
I think Romney
not.
picks up the independent voters. I think he might get some of the right-wing Republican voters off. But the problem was, where would they go?
Right.
Like, if that really was the nominee, they'd have to vote for him because they're not going to vote on the other side.
So you put milquetoast in there, and then you have Harris in there, because I don't think Harris is. Nobody's Trump in the history of all history, but nonetheless, Obama's the closest person we can go back as far as popularity went, and he gained his as president, which is interesting, right? I mean, he wasn't a famous individual prior to running for president. In fact, he was very much unknown, and frankly, I think to a large degree still is. That said, Trump's very outspoken, but you put milquetoast instead of Trump. So I don't have to go to Romney. I can go to DeSantis. DeSantis is, a statesman, and I believe doesn't have the same temperament as Trump. Let's call it that way. I think we'd be just as divided. I think the divide is a media divide. I think that it's not just a social media divide. I think that it's obviously that's a tool or the delivery mechanism, but I believe that it's a media divide that we've been experiencing because of the prevalence of media and the accessibility of media that we didn't have. Even in Obama's time, we had still people read newspapers. Yeah. Google and the algorithms and all of those things were just starting to truck along and starting to be developed. Prior to the Obama administration, you had Bush, and you were literally reading newspapers then. And before Bush was Clinton, newspapers as well, and then your 5 o'clock news and so on and so forth. News has always been, or media has always been, a big influence in any country, in any society.
Sure. Federalist Papers back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the media influences all kinds of political thing, and it's a necessary, whether we call it evil or a necessary advantage or benefit or whatever else, depending on what message you believe in. I wonder, on your question, is the political divide that we're talking about obviously is under its party lines right now, right? It's unfortunately extreme right and extreme left, not a lot of middle, at least that is represented. And I think that unfortunately what happens is that the politicians, I would really love to have a conversation. And in fact, I did. Like I said, I was on a podcast with Sheriff Lamb and had a nice conversation with him, kind of off the record, and not to say anything that he said was controversial or anything, but he seemed to be a very reasonable individual and understood both sides of an issue.
The good sheriff is reasonable.
And talked about it and talked about it with me and even actually was pretty good about talking about it live on the podcast and wasn't shying away from stuff that might have made him seem a little bit less conservative on certain things than maybe people would think, which I find anybody who's willing to listen at least to one side, I find refreshing. I wonder if a lot of our politicians are actually that way, because I feel like a lot of these politicians were successful, like you said, Trump, others in the business world, right? And in order to get along in the business world, you can't go into a negotiation without the ability to compromise, without the ability to give, without the ability to listen to the other side. I mean, you're just not successful if you come in and you're like, $10 billion is my offer and I'm not going to concede anything. You're not going to close a lot of deals. Like, everybody wants something.
So you're onto something. The great negotiator Trump is not being painted as that.
Yeah, and Trump aside, we're throwing Trump and Harris out of this, but just you said our political lines right now of Republican and Democrat. I wonder if you talk to some of these individuals, whether, like I heard Vice President Harris say something about owning a gun, and that she would shoot somebody if she was going in. Right.
I wonder if she'd prosecute herself for
I
that.
have no idea. But I know what she's trying to do. Right. Obviously, she's trying to say that's not a very liberal view. That's not a gun control view. That's maybe a little bit more on the conservative. It's trying to bridge a gap a little bit.
Just say, here, I'm still here.
Right. But that's not happening very often. I know what ploy she's trying to do, and those independent voters are important, and she probably needs to reach that gap. Whether she believes it or not, I'm going to give her the credit wherever it is that is.
Sure.
The thing that's happening, though, is that I wonder if the politicians have some of these views, and they're maybe, whether it be a little bit more liberal on the right side with certain things on certain issues, and they understand constituencies because they represent certain states as well. And certain states have issues that Arizona has immigration issues that Ohio doesn't. Right. And so whatever or Chicago and gun rights may have different issues that
each state has different
Florida
issues.
doesn't have.
Sure.
And so they may lean certain biases, and they may be more representative or more flexible with certain opinions if you were to talk to them one-on-one off the record. But the problem is your news cycle, like you said, the social media, the cancel culture, which is my least favorite thing of our media, has put them in a position where if they do come down on some of these issues, if they are flexible in any way, they get murdered by their own party. It's like sharks it's like blood in the water for sharks. Yeah. Somebody's looking to take it over. The minute you compromise on anything, well then compromise isn't looked at as a good thing anymore.
Right.
It's looked at as
A
you are
failure,
weak.
you're weak,
You're
right.
failure. But then we don't get anything done because of it.
Right. And the thing is and then they cut them into shorts, or they cut it short. I mean, the person may have
The
said,
context of it is.
the context is compromised.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm going back, and you brought up Federalist Papers, and I don't know what came first, honestly. I think probably the Federalist Papers did, but the Pledge of Allegiance, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure.
I don't remember. I don't know. And people out there that can Google it, and please leave a comment, man. We're lonely. I want to start reading them on here and start saying, okay, this guy says, or this gal says, and that'd be kind of cool. Anyway, let's carry on. But that would require us to read, which, we do that all day long. What I find interesting is I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Best Metallica album, everybody can argue with me on that, and justice for all. I mean, this is long before CNN, long before ABC, long before MSNBC, long before Fox, long before this great divide we're talking about, which frankly, everything's always had its counterbalance. For us politically, for sure, that's the way they drew it up. But the reality is this two-party system has gotten too partisan, has gotten too stuck. Where you talk to, this is going to shock you, I had an experience with a former sheriff, not Sheriff Lamb, whom I do think is a very reasonable fellow. By all intents and purposes, and the few times that I've had an opportunity to get to meet him and have a few things that were of concern of us both, but he a very reasonable guy. Just as reasonable as him, and he, in my opinion, was Arpaio. I met Arpaio a lot, and I did not like Arpaio going into our immediate meetings or things like that. Now, typically, I'm conservative, and that would, a lot of what he does would definitely have been very acceptable to me. And then a lot of how he did it, and the whole, he might have been the OG Trump, really. Might have been the original, but he was America's sheriff, and he was this, that, and the other. The reality is when the cameras were not on, he was very all about, listening to what made the most sense.
Interesting.
And back then, what the topic was me, Montgomery, him in a room, and it was interesting that we're working out the criminal side of the Arpaio sweeps, the criminal side of what was going on there, that I felt like, okay, you don't have the manpower, and I'm going to keep beating you in court time and time and time again, because you don't work up your cases. You just sweep them up because they're illegal. Yeah. So you make a snap decision, and frankly, most of the time they're right. That the person has, is here illegally, but they just didn't have the horsepower behind what our country requires as a conviction is beyond all right, and beyond all reasonable doubt, and there's no due process, all that jazz. And so he was very open to, okay, that makes sense when it was presented that way. I was surprised at that, and you didn't hear much about the Arpaio sweeps anymore, but they were still very trying to do.
Till they put him in jail.
Well, yeah. Actually,
he didn't learn his lesson.
The jail didn't do it. This did. This was interesting. I don't know if this was the particular thing that did it or what. He just was very interesting. I understand how being a sheriff of Maricopa County, the hub of Arizona, so to speak, I understand how that would be a challenging sitting there and watching a bunch of folks jumping your fence and not being able to do anything about it.
Sure.
And being a law and order person.
Most border states, sheriffs or whatever else
are that way. Lamb shares that same viewpoint, going, like how frustrating that would be. And so you have an actor or somebody that was proactive with Arpaio, in Arpaio. Well, you have, and he found every camera he could to talk to about it. What I'm trying to say is I think that the red is fading, and I think that the blue is fading. I think that the extremes of both sides, well, there's extremes on both sides. I find that the extremes of the blue are really hard to define, and things that we never would have considered to be mainstream or even considerable are becoming or trying to become mainstream. It wasn't that long ago where Obama said no to gay marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, people forget that. That was early, mid 2008, 10, 11 area. I mean, that's not that long ago. We're in 24 right now. I mean, it's not that long ago. And Obama was no on the gay marriage thing, and it was his second term in office wherein that became a thing. So over here we have, okay, this person's running in this race, and this person happens to be doing puberty blockers and this, that, and the other, and trying to transition into a different sex, and they're going to compete against whomever else, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about this now. And it's like, where did we slide into this? How did we slide into this? And I feel like beyond that, and the blue side, I think the blue side's a little bit more confused than the red side. But the red side is starting to fade and go, that compromise thing that you just brought up, there's folks that are falling in the middle and wanting to become independents, more RFK type of Republican. Funny that I just said that, but but it's kind of got some truth ring into it. And I believe that there probably could be a third party victor. The reality was when Trump won in 2016, he was a third party victor.
Because he'd been a Democrat. He was a Republican.
He really isn't either one. I mean, he's just not. He's a populist. He's a businessman. And the reality is the way he looks at, let's say, the way he tackled abortion the other day and said, look, abortion is a state decision. How I feel about it doesn't matter. And it's a state decision. It should be between, the states have the things that they consider. In my opinion, it should be between a woman and a doctor, and it should be rare. And it should. Well, Clinton said the same thing, like identically. And okay, very acceptable in 2003, 93, 97, 90, 94, 95, when Clinton was our head man. Very acceptable. But the fact that it's a state thing and it's between you and your neighbors. I mean, how do you guys all feel about this? And you guys put your own regulations on it. That's the way that this should be, because it's very personal. No. And you don't need the federal government meddling in every little tiny thing. And I mean, that's the bottom of the whole thing is, what does the federal government have, or what is it needed for, and what isn't it needed for? So that's really, before Trump, Republicans are, what do they call that? A country club party. It was a party of the wealthy and of the war and of the law and order and of the strict, line of the law, whatever. And viewed in that was the blue collar or the middle class was being overlooked by the Republicans. And that's typically the way the party looks. And now all of a sudden we have this billionaire that's orange that's running, and he's a champion for the people, for the blue collar, for the workers, and for that. And it's completely flip-flopped. And over here on the blue side, they're those that have been true blue and have a clue of how their party has been all these many years. They were the champion of the blue collar. They were the champion of the downtrodden. They were the champion of that people. They were the no war folks. And now all of a sudden it's just like flip-flop completely. They're the ones wanting to, get into every skirmish that's happening around the world right now. And frankly, with the whole Israel thing, pick your battle on that. There's some blue that are on the Palestine side, and there's some blue that are on Israel's side. Either way, you're over there. And frankly, I'm not sure how I land on that one. Honestly, I got to be honest. I mean, Israel has always been an ally for us, But at the end of the day, I don't know enough about it to discuss it. I'm pulling a Westover.
And I think the challenge too, just back to your original thought of why these, lines are becoming more blurry on party lines and whatever else, and why there's more independent voters. And I think part of, and even just on a voting block, like who am I going to choose in particular election? I think what it's come down to now, which is a tough thing. Before it was Republican values are this. Let's say it's Christian economy, small government, whatever, freedom or rule of law, whatever type of thing. And, progressive or Democrat may have been, like you said, representative of the downtrodden or those that are underrepresented, represented perhaps lower class individuals or lower to middle class individuals, bigger government, opportunity for all, school for all, whatever. Yeah. So those values were somewhat well defined, and it was almost a general, okay, those align more with my values where I am in life. I want to progress more with this party. But what ended up what I think is happening right now is that there's all those little things, or all those general things, became little individualized things or big individualized thing, depending on where you land on it. And now it's hard to attach to like a value system, because you may have one little outlier here that you feel strongly about. And then it takes you away from that entire general value system, because we don't feel like we're being represented in a general sense now on either party.
Wow,
it's these individual like little elements. And so it's like, hey, I lean this way, but I have a gay son. And I feel like that underrepresentation on one side is pulling me to the point where I don't want rights stripped away from that. And so I have to go this way, because
they go
individually, I don't want to be here.
Right.
But that individual
But once you start that trek, have you not noticed how hard it goes? Like, it starts slow.
Yeah.
But that's a really good example you just said.
Or whatever it is, I have, I've been able to take it. I got disabled, and I was a wealthy, rich American at one point, but now I have to take care of these I have to take advantage of these government programs that I don't want stripped, or whatever the individual. And a lot of times it's these major like social issues, right? Maybe it's Israel or Palestine or whatever. You've got a Palestinian best friend, and all of a sudden that's now the individual. Okay, now I've got to go to this side, even though you're being pulled mostly in your value system in another side.
Yeah.
And because we know there's no compromise on either side, it pains us, I think, or there's individuals that are stuck going to one thing because of one issue, because of one particular issue. Maybe it's the Latino voter that's like, look, Latino voters for the most part, conservative, want the economy to be strong, want government out of their business,
want government away completely,
very family oriented, et cetera. But mass deportations of all their friends and family kind of hangs on and goes, okay, I have to at least think about, because Republican or Latino voting bloc traditionally has leaned Republican.
Right.
But in the last 20 years, it's swung heavily the other side,
right.
Because they're not feeling, because of this fear. The Democratic Party created a lot of this, and now I've seen polls where it's leaning back the other direction, because they feel like the immigrant community that's coming in right now doesn't represent them well.
Okay, so
because we got Venezuelan criminals or whatever it is that's going on. And so you have these individual issues that are pulling people away from their value system, because the parties are not representing fully a generalized value system where we can say, okay, generally this is what we believe. We can compromise to get things done because we know there's things on this side that generally they believe in. Yeah. But we have these individual issues that are so far apart that middle person goes, this is the one I care about the most, so I got to go over here, even though this kind of takes me away from.
I'm going to go to something that you've seen probably way more than me, but I'm going to start with basketball, which we both know you've seen way more than me. Okay? All right.
I see it.
So, momentum in a game. Oh, a beautiful thing and a terrible thing. It's the great and dreadful thing. You beat the greatest teams or the best opponents when you start to get some momentum going, and all of a sudden, hey, they better look out.
We have a timeout cheer that when we go on a run, it's like 10 or 12-0 run, and we come, and the other team usually calls a timeout. We always have a timeout. cheer that we say crush their souls, because we know
it's time.
That
this is
the
it.
energy's down on the other side.
Yeah, and they're over there trying to create that momentum stop.
Yeah.
They're a little bit of a break in the game to where that momentum stops. Momentum is so important. Well, momentum, let's use that in what you just broke down perfectly. Momentum is, okay, the majority of what our general lean, I might have a gay son, but I lean conservative for the most part. So my general lean, but I don't feel that my gay son's being represented in.
Or you feel like he's gonna suffer or be pained,
and so
because
that needs to be looked at and go, okay, well, I still, these are my principles, and I'm going to see if I can't make a difference with that particular element that I am passionate about, as far as those rights of those that may be in the gay or lesbian community. Okay, there's that. It's interesting to me, because now we're on to something. I was actually viscerally ticked off last week. And I don't have this opportunity very often, but I'm wondering how you deal with this. When I have a Latino or Latina in our law firm here, and they're trying to clean their criminal record, or they're trying to achieve something, their son is a family member or themselves are accused of a crime, whatever the case might be, they pull out. They either have their purse, and the Latinos have their purses pretty well organized in my historical. I've just kind of, it's a weird thing that I've noticed. How interesting. If they have a purse, it's very well organized. Anyway, but they have the billfold of the Latino is about as big as a briefcase, but somehow fits in their hip pocket. It has every It has every business card of people that they've met along the way, and they know exactly where it is, how to get there. They know to the penny how much money is in their billfold. It is a huge billfold. Have you experienced this? I'm assuming I'm not the only one. They all look the same. I don't know how they don't sit like this the whole time. I get this fella that comes in. It looks like he just came out of a barber shop. I mean, a little bit younger fella, maybe 28, 29. Really nice cropped beard like you, but nice hair just barely done, so on and so forth. Had a watch that probably had some value to it. His clothes were definitely not coming out of the campo. Definitely not coming out off a work, construction site or some sort of work environment. Okay. And he comes in to hire me to do a few things, because he's been accused of some things. And when he pulls out his billfold, it looked a whole lot like this, just for a nice visual aid. There's a small little billfold. And in it, he had 2 driver's licenses, one with the travel ability.
The real ID stuff.
The TSA or whatever. The other one was a regular driver's license, like what we have. He just had 2. Okay, I don't know why, because they come in all in one now, but apparently it's just what he has. Then he had an access card, I noticed. So he had which is a health insurance card, and it was sold to him as health insurance, but really the acronym access was on there. Like, holy crap! Okay, there's that, and then there's a couple of credit cards, and I just asked him, a little bit about these things. He's been here for 4 months. He has a driver's license. Do you know how many people would sell their soul that come through our doors for a driver's license? That's why they're swinging red.
Yeah.
That's why the Latinos are starting to go red.
Asylum guy?
Yes. That's why. He's a Venezuelan. And that's why they're swinging red. Because what's going on right now politically they're fearful that not only are their jobs getting eaten up, but they're fearful of that line that you and I have discussed.
The Democrats screwed up on the immigration side. I mean, sorry. You had an opportunity to take care of, if you were going to go hard on immigration, I just don't understand the strategy. I don't know why you wouldn't go and say, I've got a potential voting block in the future that I could really help out, or a voting bloc that exists right now that has friends and families that could really benefit from getting, like, whether it be the DACA program permanently in a path towards green card residency or whatever we've talked about. And they waited until 4 months before the election when they came out with this new legislation, the new parole in place, which ultimately, you can sit on the fence either way. I don't care, but it really isn't. It's benefiting 500,000 people, and yet what their focus was, which I think could have been a great little ploy that they could have used to actually make a difference years ago. Like, that parole in place program could have been implemented 4 years ago at the beginning of the administration and probably would have gone quieter and would have helped a lot. And maybe it wouldn't have, but it wasn't allowing any more people to come into the United States. It was benefiting people that were already here and 10 years here, like people that have been here for a long time. Instead, you did this. I don't know where the thought was. I don't know what was going on. I think maybe it was this overreaction. We talked about these pendulum swings, and Trump got accused of doing the caging, and we made arguments that Obama maybe started that, and that's probably true on both sides. But the separating of families and the caging of individuals that came to
also probably true on both sides.
So the pendulum swung this way, and so it was like this over corrective action